All right, so if you got your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Psalm 16. Psalm 16. This week and next week, that's our last 2 weeks in Psalm, and then we'll go next into Christmas, and then after that, we'll talk about New Year's. And then after that, most likely we'll be going into Philippians. That's where we're probably heading after that. But today we're going to look at Psalm 16. I looked up the word confidence in the dictionary, in Webster's dictionary, and this is what they said the word confidence. This is what the definition is. A feeling or a consciousness of one's power or of reliance on one's circumstances, faith, or belief that one will act in a right, proper, and effective way. Basically, it means that you trust something, right? If you put your confidence in something, then you're going to trust it, right? I thought about it, how often we put our confidence in things from day to day. Like last night when I went to bed, I had some confidence. Not full confidence, but I had some confidence that I'd wake up this morning and be here this morning, being able to share God's Word with you. I get up this morning, eat breakfast, and after that, I jump in the car. I have confidence that the car is going to get me to where I need to go because I've got in it and head on out. I have some confidence in other drivers as I'm driving along, coming from the house over to here, because I don't know if y'all have noticed this or not, but drivers are getting worse nowadays than before. Now, my wife would probably say I'm one of the ones that's getting worse than the others, but when we get in the car and we start to head out, we have confidence in our car to get us there, and we somewhat have confidence and the other person that's driving beside us that hopefully they know what they're doing, right? We have confidence in other things, right? We have confidence that we will have future days here. And y'all are like, well, are you sure about that? Well, let me ask you, have you already made Christmas plans? A lot of people will say, yeah, we've made them, or yeah, we're thinking about them, right? Well, then that means you have a confidence that you're going to make it to Christmas. How many of you have put your Christmas trees up? Well, then that means you have confidence, some confidence that you're going to see Christmas, because you wouldn't put up a tree if you weren't going to see Christmas, right? And then you have gifts under the tree. Well, then that means you're having some confidence that you're going to be able to make it to Christmas to be able to see them. So we have confidence in some things, but what this Psalm 16, is going to tell us is that we should put our confidence in God because of what He's done for us. So our big idea, if you look on your listening guide, our big idea today is we can have confidence God will see us through. We can have confidence God will see us through. So let's go ahead and get started. Psalm 16, starting in verse 1. It says, "Preserve me, O God, for I take refuge in you. I said to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good besides you. As for the saints who are in the earth, they are the majestic ones in whom is all of my delight. The sorrows of those who have bartered for another god will be multiplied. I shall not pour out their drink offerings of blood, nor will I take their names upon my lips. The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You support my lot. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, my heritage is beautiful to me. And I will bless the Lord who has counseled me. Indeed, my mind instructs me in the night. And I have set the Lord continuously before me, because He is at my right hand, and I will not be shaken." All right, we'll stop there. We'll start going through this. The first point on your listening guide is, what does confidence in the Lord look like? What does confidence in the Lord look like? So what we're going to do is we're going to see what David said about confidence in the Lord, what that looked like in his life, and then should we then see that in our lives? So first thing we can see is that David starts this psalm off different than others. Because he says in here, preserve me, O God, for I take refuge in you. So he's saying, Lord, basically the way this is written, verse 1, he says, preserve me. He's commanding God. He's saying, you need to preserve me. He's commanding God to preserve him. He's not asking, he's commanding that God would watch over him, that God would protect him. And then he says, for I take refuge in you, meaning that I find security in you. Not in me, but in you. And I need you to look over me. I need you to watch out for me. He takes refuge in God. He takes shelter in God. He takes protection in God. But then we can start to see why he starts to do this, because he says God in 3 different ways in the first 2 verses. Look at it again. Preserve me, O God. That O God, that is El or Elohim. You've heard those words before, the Hebrew word for God. That means God or Mighty One. So he's calling him by his formal name of Elohim. But then the next thing is he said, and I said to the Lord. Now in my translation, the Lord is all capitalized, which means Yahweh, which means God's personal name. That is the name that God gave Moses when Moses was at the burning bush, and he said, well, who am I going to tell the Israelites sent me? And he said, tell them that I am sent you, and that I am is Yahweh. And he's saying that this I said to the Lord, meaning Yahweh, my personal Lord, you are my Lord. And then he uses Lord again and said, this one in mine is not capitalized all the way through, which means this word is Adonai, or master. He's saying, you're my personal God, but not only are you my personal God, but you are my master too. Because of these things, I take refuge in you. So let me ask you, what do you take refuge in? What's your safe place nowadays? With everything going on in the world, where's your safe place? When you had a bad day, what do? See, some people, when they have a bad day, they come home, they plop down on the couch or the chair, and they grab the remote, and they turn the TV on, and they watch TV, and they kind of tune out everything else, right? And that's their safe place. They'll just sit down, and they'll start watching it, and they could be watching anything. It could be sports, it could be sitcoms, it could be movies, it could be any of that, but they just kind of watch TV, and that's their safe place. Others, when they get home, the younger crowd, what they do? Well, they do 1 or 2 things. One, they go get their Xbox or their PlayStation, and they'll sit down in front of it, and they'll play their games, and they'll just kind of zone out there. Or the other is, what do they never leave home without? Their phones, right? I think that thing is glued to their hands. And they have that with them all the time, so that when they're having a bad day, they don't even have to go anywhere. They can just stop and zone out with their phone and just start going through their phone. And that's their safe place. Others, well, some like retail therapy. What I mean by retail therapy, they go shopping when they've had a bad day, and they just kind of zone out because they go into the store and well, let me look at this, and let me look at this, and let me look at this. Guys, we're different. That's true. We can even do that at home now. We don't even have to leave the home. We can sit in front of our computer and shop, right? Guys, we're different, right? When it's Christmas shopping time, we get a list, we know our list, we go into the store, we grab our list, and then we come back home. We are like focused on a task. Get this and get out as fast as we can. Ladies, y'all are shop therapy. That means y'all go in and you want to look at one thing and then another thing, and it may lead to another thing, and you may be there 2 hours because you're getting away from everything, right? Well, then there are other people. What they find comfort in is they want to go into the kitchen and they want to cook or they want to bake. And that just gets them away from everywhere else. Others, they'll sit down with a book and they'll just read and tune out the world by doing that. And then others is sports. They want to watch sports. I know, Larry, I got to mention fishing, right? If I don't, I'm in trouble. Fishing's a sport, right? It's you against the fish. So part of the sports is fishing. Get out on the lake, even when it's 32 degrees, and fish. So when you have a bad day, where do you go? How do you find any kind of relief for that? Because see, David is saying that when I have a bad day, I look to the Lord. He's my refuge. I go to Him because He's my protection. Now remember who David is. David is king. That meant that he could call anybody to come protect him. And he's saying, I've got an army at my disposal, but guess what? God is my protection. God is my refuge. So if we're going to have confidence in the Lord, that means He's our refuge. He's our protection. Now, am I saying those other things are bad? No. But I'm saying that we shouldn't put our trust in those things. God gave us those things as entertainment, but it's not to take our focus off of Him. So the first part of having confidence is that we know that God is our refuge. God is our shelter, our protector. But then we can also see that the second thing of knowing we have confidence is defining our relationship with God. Look at verse 2 again. He said, I said to the Lord, you are my Lord. But then look at the next thing he says. I have no good besides you. I have no good besides you, which means that God was David's all in all. Everything that he was, then guess what? That's what God was to him. God defined everything about him. David was defined by his relationship with God. That meant any kind of interaction that David had with anybody else, God had an interaction with it too, because he was defined by everything. That meant that God influenced every different relationship David had. He was the king, then that meant God influenced that relationship with everybody else. He was a father, that meant it influenced every relationship. Well, then that means if we have confidence in God, then that means we have confidence that He can influence and should influence every part of our lives. Which means then that He has the right to influence every relationship we have. So for me, that means that I'm a father. That means that He has the right to influence that relationship with my kids in my life. I'm a husband. That means that He has the right to influence that relationship in my life. I'm a pastor. Well, I hope He influences that relationship in my life, right? That means because my relationship with all of you. But then also, what about for y'all? That means that anytime you're going out and speaking to somebody else, because of your confidence in God, that means that He has the right to influence any part of those conversations that you have with anybody else. Because He says, look, He says, I have no good besides you, meaning that when I take it on myself, then bad can come about. But when I trust you and I allow you to influence, then good comes from it. And He's saying that everything that is part of our life should be influenced by Him. We are defined by God because of our confidence in Him, because of our relationship with Him. So first part is a refuge. Second part is we're defined by Him. We know who we are by Him. But then the next thing we can see is that God will provide. Look at verse 5 through verse 8 again. It says, the Lord is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You support my lot. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, my heritage is beautiful to me. And I will bless the Lord who has counseled me. And indeed, my mind instructs me in the night. I have set the Lord continuously before me. Because He is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. David was confident that God would provide for him. And he's saying that he's going to provide everything that he needs. The Lord is my portion of my inheritance and my cup. You support my lot. That support my lot means that whatever I need, you're going to provide for me. And I have confidence that you will provide that for me. David had confidence that God had his best interest in mind at all times. But also, David had confidence that God would also give him counsel at all times. So he's providing more than just one thing. Because most time when I say God's going to provide for you, what do you think? Stuff, right? Because that's the way our mind is geared. But David's saying God's going to provide the stuff for me that I need, not that I want, that I need. But also he's saying God will provide the counsel that I need. So not just material things, but he's also going to lead me in the ways that I should go. So he's confident God will provide financially for him, but he's also confident that God would provide as far as instructions on what he should do. Do you listen to God's instructions? Look at what he says. He says, God will even instruct me at nighttime. Verse 7, I will bless the Lord who has counseled me. Indeed, my mind instructs me in the night, meaning God's going to talk to me even at night. There's no time that's off limits for God to instruct me. You ever woke up in the middle of the night? We all have, right? And then we had to start thinking, all right, God, why did you wake me up? What is it that you want to tell me? Sometimes we just say, oh, I'm ready to go back to sleep. I got a big day ahead of me and I need to focus on that. But sometimes God will instruct us at night. Let me share with you one story that happened to us, and you can see both sides of God providing financially, but also God providing as far as instructions. When we went to seminary, we packed up family, kids and everything, and we left here and we went out to Fort Worth. So we're about 1,000 miles from the family, or from her parents, my parents. And at that point in time, we had sold the house, I had quit my job, and we go out there and I start to take summer classes, getting ready for the fall classes. And while we were out there, we were basically on a super, super thin budget. Is that a good way to put it? Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. We were basically just struggling to make it through. To remind y'all of when we went to seminary, you remember when the last recession hit? About 2008, 2009? That's when we moved out there. So that when I went out there, I started looking for jobs and there were no jobs. So we're having to rely completely on the Lord. And so we're watching everything that we spend. We're doing everything we can to cut back and everything. Ashlyn gets sick one day, and so we had to take her to the doctor. And so we know there's a doctor bill coming. And we were on the seminary plan insurance. And the seminary plan insurance is basically, if there's something catastrophic, we'll pay for it. But anything else, you're on your own. We had one of those high deductible insurances. So we knew that when Ashlyn's bill came in, we were going to have to pay for it. So we're waiting, and the bill comes in the mail, and we get the bill, so then we got to pay the bill. One thing we didn't know is that back here in South Carolina, one of my dad's friends called him up and he said, look, I need their address out in Fort Worth. And he said, well, why do you need their address out in Fort Worth? He said, well, I need to send them something. And he said, what are you going to send? He said, well, God told me that I need to send them something. And Dad said, at this point, Dad was like, okay, look, I've already seen God move enough for at this point that I just know when God says you're supposed to do something, then you just do it. So here's their address. You do whatever you're going to do. Well, we get the mail. Dad told me, he said, this person called and he said this, and he said he was going to send you something. I don't know what he's going to send. I have no clue. And so we get the mail from him. Open it up. It's a check for just about the exact amount of Ashlyn's doctor bill. And we're like, God's in this. We know we're where we're supposed to be. I have confidence that God is going to be with us the whole way through this. And so see, when you have confidence in God, you know that He's going to provide financially sometimes for you, or whatever your needs are. And we look to Him in confidence that He will provide those things. But on the flip side, we also know that He will instruct us on what we should do. And we're looking to Him to instruct us on what we should do. And see, David said, I have confidence that God will provide for me. And he didn't just mean financially. He also meant that he was going to provide for him instructions. He's the king. He's got to lead the country. And he's saying that I'm going to trust God to provide for me for the country, but also provide for me as far as how I should lead this country. And he was saying, he said, and it can come during the daytime, it can come at night. But then look at verse 8, what he says. And he says, I have set the Lord continuously before me, meaning I have confidence in God. I'm going to follow God. And look, because He is at my right hand, meaning that He's right here beside me. He's not going anywhere. That's the position of strength. And he said, because of that, I will not be shaken. Regardless of what I'm going through, it's not going to shake me. Because I have confidence in God. And He will be there for me. So what does confidence look like in our lives? If we're going to say, do I have confidence in the Lord? Then let's look for indicators of that. That means, do we turn to God when we're having bad times? Is He our refuge? Do we come to Him when things are going bad? Or do we try to do it on our own? Do we allow God to define who we are? Do we allow Him to influence every conversation we have with everybody? Do we allow Him to influence every relationship that we have? Do we allow Him to do that? And the next is, do we have confidence that God will provide, not just financially, but also as far as guidance on what we should do and what we shouldn't do? And see, that's what David is saying. I have confidence, and this is what the confidence looks like in my life. But then let's get to the second part. Why should we have confidence in God? Why should we have confidence in God? The second part of this Psalms tells us why David had confidence. He's telling us what confidence looks like, but next he's going to tell us why. Why should I place my confidence in Him? Let's start at verse 9. Therefore, remember when I said therefore, you look back to see why therefore is there. Well, he's saying here's confidence. I have confidence in God. Now here's the reason why. Therefore my heart is glad and my glory rejoices. My flesh also dwells securely. For you will not abandon my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to go to undergo decay. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forever. Well, see, David comes back and he says, this is why I have confidence. And first thing that David looks at is how God had acted in the past. Therefore my heart is glad and my glory rejoices. My flesh also dwells securely, for you will not abandon me. You're not going to leave me. You haven't left us as a nation before, and you're not leaving us now. And because of this, I can have confidence in you. If we look at what happened, though, with the Israelites, God had plenty of reasons to abandon them because they had turned their back on Him many times. Let's think about it. God brings them out of Egypt, right? Moses is leading them out of Egypt. He parts the Red Sea. They go through the Red Sea. And then after that, they come out and they're going to go into the Promised Land. They send 12 spies out to go look at the Promised Land. And as they look at the Promised Land, 10 of them come back and they say, I'm not going there. Those people are big. Now, it's nice over there, but we can't take those people. We can't do it. And then 2 of them came back and said, God's with us. Let's go. And they decide to listen to the 10. And they don't show confidence in God. And God could have said at that point, okay, I'm done with you. But He stays patient with them. Once they get into the land, God told them what they were supposed to do. Take the land. It's your land. Take the land. What do? They don't take the land. They live there, but they don't take it. He could have said, all right, I'm done with you. You're not listening to me. And then they start looking around at all the other nations, and all the other nations have kings, and they said, look, we kind of want to be like everybody else. And God's saying, I'm your king. No, we want to be like everybody else. And He gives them a king. And He could have easily have abandoned them then. But David personally in his life, he had seen how he had messed up. And God didn't abandon him. He stayed with him all the way through. David had had an affair. David had had somebody killed. David had done a count on the nation of Israel that he wasn't supposed to do. And because of that, a huge number of Israelites lost their lives. But God never abandoned him. He was right there with them all the way through. So we can look at the Old Testament and we can see time and time and time again why we should have confidence in God. Because He never abandoned His people. He was always there with His people. But then we can look at the New Testament too. And we can see why we should have confidence in God. See, there's another side to this psalm. And we can see it in Acts chapter 2 and in Acts chapter 13. This psalm is talked about when it's talking about the coming of Christ and that He is going to die. He's going to be buried and He's going to be raised from the dead. In Acts chapter 2, Peter is writing and he said, so because he was a prophet and knew that God had sworn to him with an oath to seat one of his descendants on the throne. So he's talking about David. He's saying David knows this. He's writing to us. He looked ahead and spoke of the resurrection of Christ, that He was neither abandoned to Hades, nor did His flesh suffer decay. This Jesus God raised up, to which we are all witnesses. So he's saying David was writing this psalm about the coming Messiah. And then Paul said it also in Acts chapter 13 when he was given a sermon. He said, therefore, we also say in another Psalms, you will not allow your Holy One to undergo decay. For David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep and was laid among his fathers and underwent decay. But he whom God raised did not undergo decay. Now, where are they getting this from? Well, if you look at verse 10, it says, for you will not abandon my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One. That Holy One that he's talking about here is the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And he's saying, you will not allow your Holy One to undergo decay. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy, and in your right hand there are pleasures forever. And this Holy One that he's talking about is Jesus. David had been given a promise. The prophet Nathan had come to him. And let me read to the words that Nathan had told him. Nathan was saying exactly what God had told him to say. He said, when your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, you know what he's saying? When your life's over and you die, and you're buried with your family, he says, I will rise up your offspring after you. He's saying there's someone else that's going to come after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. Meaning that he's going to come from your family line, And God is going to establish his kingdom. And he shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. This house that he's talking about is the church. Ones who have put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ and what he did for us. And he's saying he's coming to build it. Let me read to you what John Piper said about this verse of the Psalms. He said, David knew from God's word that he would die and lie in the grave like his fathers, but that God would set one of his descendants on his throne. And this descendant would not be one of a succession of kings that goes on and on, but with him all succession would stop. His kingdom would have no end. It would be an eternal kingdom. In other words, David knew a king was coming that would be from his seed, and that in the line of David would come to an end with him. He would defeat death. He would not see corruption like David. That is his kingdom, and it would be eternal. And what do we see with the life, the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus? The fulfillment of this psalm. And because of that, we can have confidence in God. Because he said over and over again, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what happened. And because of that, we can place our confidence in him. Our bottom line, our confidence comes from God's past fullness. Our confidence comes from God's past faithfulness. So how do we know we have confidence in God? Well, we can take a look at how David reacted and how he showed confidence. We can see that when he had bad days, God was his refuge. That's where he went. When he looked about the influence of God in his life, he had confidence that God would influence his whole life and that he gave him the ability to influence his whole life. He was confident that God would provide for him. But why did he have that confidence? Because of what God had done for him in the past. And the same is true for us. Why do we have confidence? Because of what God's done for us in the past. He sent his son to live the life we couldn't live, to die on the cross to pay for our sins, to be raised from the dead to defeat death for us, so that we can have a relationship with him. But let me end with these last two verses here, verse 3 and verse 4. David says, as for the saints who are in the earth, they are the majestic ones in whom is all of my delight. He says, I like to look at people that have that relationship with God. That delights me to be able to see that. But then look at verse 4. The sorrows of those who have bartered for another God will be multiplied. And I shall not pour out their drink offerings of blood, and nor will I take their names upon my lips. You know what he's saying? He's saying it pains me when people don't have that relationship with God. When people reject God, that pains me to see that. And as a pastor, that pains me to see that too. Knowing somebody is far away from God. So I'm going to close by saying this. Do you have that relationship with him? Have you put your trust in him? He's given us multiple reasons why we can have confidence in him. But have you placed your trust in him? I'll be down front and will be glad to share with you how you can have a relationship with him. For the others of you, you've already got that relationship. Let me ask you, are you showing confidence in him by the way that you handle certain things? So look at the way David handled it. He put his trust in him. He was his shelter, his refuge. He knew that God was going to provide for him, not just financially, but also in what he should do, what he should say. And he had confidence to allow God to influence every part of his life. Do you have confidence in the Lord to allow him to do those? All right, let's close in prayer.